I would imagine your friend through this process of engaging with GPTs, asking questions, having it critique the answers and going back and
Mm-hmm.
forth, your friend is also learning.
Yeah.
And that's a neat way where before, let's say pre-GPT, you would Google this and you'd have to read articles and
Yes.
come up with your own questions. And that is a way to learn too,
Mm-hmm.
right? Go through and scan and you have to come up with your own answers. In this way though, you almost are you're you're engaging in
Yeah.
dialogue. You're engaging in the reading and the back and forth. And I think that's how we also learn through that feedback loop. I think
Mm-hmm.
education is going to take a big jump because
Yeah.
now, you can learn so quick
Mm-hmm.
on your own, right? Like I knew a guy that taught himself in 6 months how to code, like how to code a complex, like basic language.
Mm-hmm.
It was fantastic. Like he's like, Vaseem, I was able to, and I'm not saying I'm writing code using AI, but I was able to learn the theory, the methodology, the syntax, all of that, because I just kept going back and forth, back and forth. As soon as I didn't understand something, I'd be like, okay, can you explain this div
Mm-hmm.
class symbol? What, again, way beyond my pay
Mm-hmm.
grade, right? He's like, can you explain this, this, and this? And he actually took the time to learn that way. Historically,
Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to another beautiful. Sorry, I gotta start. Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to another episode of the Nanaya Yabua podcast, where we dig deep into conversations that matter to us. Today's episode, we are going to have a conversation with Vaseem, the AI guy. And the reason being that as much as we're telling our human story is slowly changing with AI. We cannot run away from it. So if we cannot run away from it, we better understand it more and how best to utilize it. So we're going to have conversations for people who do not know what AI is, and then dig deeper into how we can utilize it positively, the ethics around it, and then any other thing that comes up, we will navigate it. Vasim, thank you for saying yes. Thank you for coming on the Nanaya Yeboah podcast today. Oh,
it is my
so
absolute pleasure, Nana. Absolute pleasure.
excellent. So Vasim, how do I say your last name? By
Big. So think
Beg,
vague with a B. Yeah.
Vague with a B. Okay,
Yeah.
Vasim Beg, also known as the Vasim the AI guy, which I mentioned earlier, is passionate about AI education and also does consultation for people and businesses and schools and etc etc. So he specializes in making generative AI accessible and actionable for businesses of all sizes. So I remember you invited me to one that you were doing with Brantford businesses, and before I dig deep into it, when you started, I had three sisters sitting close to me. They got up as soon as they heard the name AI, and they were going to start a business. And I said, you might as well listen to how you could utilize this AI if you're going to start a business. It's like, oh, AI. And they got up and they left. But then you started and you gave information how you could use AI. And I'm thinking that the negativity we have about AI is preventing most of us from utilizing it better. Okay, so
100%. A lot of
let's
fear.
get into it. Yeah. What are your thoughts on those?
Yeah, so I guess we'll take it in two places. I'll cover the fear angle. The way
Mm,
that I kind of approach it, if you think about this whole thing about AI, right? So AI simply stands for artificial intelligence, right? And that's been like the terminology for a number of years. I look at us as humans, we are artificially intelligent as well in a way, because,
mm-hmm,
a lot of what we learn comes from reading books, speaking with people, various stimuli, walking through walkabouts in life and hiking, whatever the case may be, but we absorb, we learn, we synthesize, and then we apply. And so for me, when I talk about, like, one of the entities of myself, Vaseem the AI guy, I want to make sure that AI is applicable, bar none. Let's demystify it. Let's get around the fear, because fear is normal. It's okay to be afraid. It's okay to be concerned. There's big question marks around it. So I try to bridge the gap between a lot of those, what we call, let's say, things that are potentially harmful and dangerous, that could be risky, and then the likelihood of those things happening, right? So I play a lot of, in those worlds. So the way I like to envision AI, really simply put, is that, and when I say AI, I mean generative AI, which is the whole thing around ChatGPT, or Google's version, which is called Gemini, and you may have heard of other models like DeepSeek, or
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't really matter, but they're all kind of like all part of this generative AI spectrum. Um, I imagine it like this. Imagine you had a friend who had really, really deep subject matter expertise on a subject, let's say astronomy or accounting or whatever the case may be. And they knew that subject really, really, really well because they had studied all the books, they had read all the literature, listened to all the podcasts, so on and so forth. They were trained on all of the material. And imagine that same friend had deep expertise not only on one subject, let's say hundreds, thousands, almost infinite number of subjects. My
Mm-hmm.
philosophy then is, would you not want to call a friend like that from time to time? Would you not want to text a friend like that from time to time and get their counsel, get their help, whatever the case may be?
Yes.
And when I start explaining generative AI like that,
Mm-hmm.
people start to be like, "Oh, I know how to text someone. I know what besties are. I know what friends are." And then they start to see like, okay, we can start to play with AI a little bit. And I say play because if you start playing and you have fun with it and you don't take it too seriously in the beginning,
Mm-hmm.
then you can start to unlock the potential, and you can get very, very serious with it quite fast.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I remember one of my profound conversations with you um, sent me back to actually looking at the resources that I had on hand when it comes
Mm,
to generative AI and utilizing it, which cut down my workload massively.
right.
Massively. So thank you for that encouragement and whatnot. I want to get into the AI guy, the name. Let's get into the name. How did
Mm,
we come about the AI guy? Where did the
mm.
nickname come?
Yeah, yeah. Funny
And
enough,
then
actually,
what's your personal story with that?
yeah, yeah, for sure. So, the actual name behind it. So
Yeah.
it actually originated here in Brantford
Oh,
about a year ago or so.
okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I would go out and kind of like where we met, Nana. We met at one of the chamber events here, right?
Yes.
We had met at the water bar, but I had been going to
Yes.
various chamber events in Paris and Brantford
Mm-hmm.
and so forth. And when word was getting out about what I do and how I help others, and just
Mm-hmm.
even in dialogue, right? I'd meet people
Mm-hmm.
and be like, hey, I've used this thing called ChatGPT, and this is before I even started the whole consulting arm, right? It was just more about
Mm-hmm.
getting people curious and excited. Word got around, and people would see me, right, in
Yes.
let's say the demographic, right, which is not in
Yes.
Brantford like this, and they'd be like,
not,
hey, you're
not
Vaseem, you're
not a
Vaseem,
lot of sunburn.
right? They're like,
Well
hey,
cooked.
yeah, exactly, right? Non-melanin, right? So they'd be like, hey, you're Vaseem, the AI guy, right? And I'd be like,
Yeah.
huh, yeah,
Ah,
I am. And
yes.
and it'd be neat because I'd go to like the different events, and someone would introduce me, be like, oh, he's Vaseem,
The
that
AI
AI
guy.
guy, and I'd be like, huh. And I started listening, right?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes reality speaks to you in whispers, and sometimes reality speaks to you in song. And I took the latter on this one. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
reality's singing to me here. There's something here,
Yeah.
and Vaseem, okay, that's fine. Like, I'm a noticeable character, but then the
Yeah.
whole the AI guy, I was like, let me run with that, right?
Yeah.
I'm so grateful that I did, because then we started fashioning a whole brand around it, and
Mm-hmm.
everything went in that direction. And yeah, I think yeah. So that's anyway. That's the origin. That's the origin story
Origin
of
story.
Vaseem, the AI guy, right? If we take a couple of years backwards, how I got into
Mm-hmm.
this though, um, ChatGPT came out in November of 2022, right?
Yes.
And last year is actually where 2024 is when things really accelerated for AI. Um, I'm a big believer of starting where you are, doing what you can with what you have, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so because of that ideology, whenever I would go and speak about AI, or I'd meet someone and
Mm-hmm.
they would immediately be like, "Oh my God, the robots are going to take over. I can't use AI." And I'm like, how likely is it that the robots are going to take over today? And like, you're worried about a potential future that may or may not occur, and therefore you don't want to start using or leveraging this lovely technology for your own personal or professional benefit.
Yes.
So I was like, okay, there's something that needs to be filled here. And you know what? There are people that I meet as well that are so entrenched in their fear that they won't move, and that's okay too. I'm not here to convince like every single person. Like, it's not here I'm like spreading the gospel of AI that everybody has to come on board. I think for me, I really care about the folks that are ambitious, maybe
Mm-hmm.
on the fence, a little bit confused. They know they want to use AI, but they don't know how. Those are the kinds of people I find gravitating towards. I'm happy to help those that are afraid as well.
Yes.
If you're really, really stuck in your fear, I think there's some other work that you got to do on yourself, right? I think it says the fear is not only with AI, then, right? It's just
Yes.
your mindset, right?
The mindset. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so intriguing that I had to go back and watch The Matrix.
Mm, great film.
And yes, it was intentional because it was already AI had already been talked about. So I think many people, if they've watched Terminator, they've watched how do we call it, The Matrix, and
Mm,
all those other generative AI stuff. That is
mm,
where the fear is coming from. But we also got to understand that as human beings, we are the creators of these things. So if we are the creators, we also have the power to
hmm.
make transformations. It's
Yes.
how we decide to utilize it, whether for good or for bad. Um,
Absolutely, Nana. Absolutely. And nefarious forces, let's face it, nefarious forces
mhm.
are going to be nefarious. Regardless of how many laws you put in place,
Yes,
regardless of how many bounds you put in place, regardless of how many ways you say, hey, use AI responsibly, a nefarious minded person or set of people,
yes,
they're going to be, they don't care. So
yes.
you cannot necessarily, you can protect yourself from people like that
Hmm.
and you can kind of like avoid being like people
Hmm.
like that. Yes, I think if you stop yourself because of the way that nefarious people are leveraging
Yes.
it, that's where it's like, ugh, you know?
It's there's always a way. There's always a way, but um, we don't let it stand in our way.
No.
So let's really talk about how AI is real already shaping our everyday lives in ways people don't even realize, because that is a reality.
I mean, take a really simplistic approach that if anybody watches any streaming services,
Mm-hmm.
right? You've got Netflix or Hulu or
Mm-hmm.
Amazon, in the back end, you've got recommendation engines that are saying, hey,
Yes.
Nana, Vaseem, you really, really like this content. Let me show you now a carousel of all of the things that we think you might like based on this. And you know what? Sometimes those are great suggestions if you're, especially
Yeah.
if you're,
Mm-hmm.
looking for a film or a documentary that you want to check out for the night and or the
Mm-hmm.
weekend and so forth. That's one way. If you look at social media, the biggest one is I would say that does this really well
Mm-hmm.
is TikTok, right? It has fantastically been able to look
Mm-hmm.
at your own kind of behavior, viewing patterns, and all of that, and then start to curate content or drip you content based on things that it kind of already knows that you want to watch. And again, if you are looking at it from a virtuous perspective, that's really neat because then the subjects or the ideas, if you're into cooking, let's say, or if you want
Mm-hmm.
to learn how to do home improvement or have a good laugh,
Mm-hmm.
whatever the case may be, those are the types of content. Then now, when you put your attention on something, you'll start to see those things. Be like, oh, neat, okay, this is really really helpful if I want to prepare my house for spring thaw and so forth, things like that. Or oh my gosh, this is amazing viral recipes we were talking about. My wife
Yes.
loves cooking. So like, and I enjoy cooking as well. So like we'd be able to start seeing this content, be like, oh baby, you want to try this recipe next week? Things like that. We start to get content that, goes into the things that we are already about. And that's again on the receiving end of, let's say, the AI side. Now on the creation side, this is where it gets really interesting and back to the conversation around generative AI. We see this in place now. If you do a Google search, funny enough, you now at the very top have this is the AI suggested
Yes.
answer, which is really neat. So it's already starting to be integrated into society and the way we do things. So even your traditional mindset of like Googling something, it's bringing you the AI answer at the top, right? Saying,
Yes.
hey, this is based on everything that I've scanned. Um, and so the same way I imagine a future where we start to GPT things, before Googling, or sorry, not before, in addition to Googling.
In addition, yeah.
Mm,
And it's so what you're saying, one of my friends actually utilized GPT,
mm.
geez, GPT in before any sort of interviews she does or
Ah,
she
so
goes
good.
to.
Such a good
So
piece.
it um So when she puts in the information, likely questions to be asked for management questions, leadership, etc.,
Mm.
etc., it provides her a host of questions and answers, expectations, and then she'll go exactly goes over it. So when the questions come, she knows, okay, for this, this is how you go about it. For this is how you go about it. So it enhances when she gets into an interview. So that's what she uses it for, which is, I think, great.
So great. And I'll take it one step further. I would imagine your friend, through this process of engaging with GPTs, asking questions, having it critique the answers, and going back and
Mm-hmm.
forth, your friend is also learning.
Yeah.
And that's a neat way where before, let's say pre-GPT, you would Google this and you'd have to read articles and,
Yes.
come up with your own questions. And that is a way to learn too,
Mm-hmm.
right? Go through and scan and you have to come up with your own answers. In this way, though, you almost are, you're engaging in
Yeah.
dialogue. You're engaging in the reading and the back and forth. And I think that's how we also learn, through that feedback loop,
Mm-hmm.
which is very different.
It is. It is. It is. Yeah.
Hmm.
So, how do we call it? Let's get to this question on deepfake, and
Mm,
this rolls back into the fear that people have.
mm, mm.
I watched. I don't know whether you've watched this movie G20. It came out
No.
recently. It's on Prime.
Mm.
Okay.
I'll check it out.
So,
Yeah.
in summary, it is about mercenaries using AI
Mm.
to create deep fake for terrorism. Okay, yes.
Of course, nefarious means, right?
Nefarious activities.
Yeah, always.
Yes.
Yeah.
E- exactly.
Uh,
So, is there a way that the average person, like
mm,
myself or
mm,
others, tell the difference between what's real and what's generated
Okay, we can get into that. Maybe. Okay,
on
I'm
the
gonna
surface?
I'm,
Yeah.
I'm gonna I'm gonna talk about a few things here. Deepfakes, if you think about it, right? They're like digital magic tricks, right? Right? Instead of pulling rabbits out of a hat, though, it's like AI is now able to
Mm-hmm.
realistically create fake videos, images, or even audio
Yeah.
of real people, right? Kind of like how Hollywood uses special effects to make
Yes.
movies. Deepfakes use AI to create content that um, looks and sounds amazingly real, and it isn't,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so, before we get into the tips and how we can kind of like detect and all that kind of stuff, you try doing this yourself. Let's take AI out of the equation, okay, for a moment. Imagine you had, imagine you closed your eyes and you had a person who was, and you knew a person who was really, really good at impersonating other people.
Mm.
Like they could pretend
Yes.
to sound like Barack Obama, or they could pretend to sound like Denzel Washington, or
Mm-hmm.
Donald Trump, or whatever the case may be. And you closed your eyes, and that person started to impersonate, and they were really, really good at it. How good do you think you would be able to detect whether that person's an impersonator or not? Especially if they're really, really good. So even at the human level, it's difficult for us to, um, I would say, like
Detect.
detect that. And TikTok is rife with these kinds of comedians. I've seen a guy on TikTok who, he goes up to like these celebrity parties, and he went up to like Jeff Goldblum or something like that, and he dressed
Mm-hmm.
like him and he smiled like him and he like shook his hand, and even Jeff Goldblum was like, "Oh my gosh, you're like so amazing." He's like, "No, no, you're amazing." Like, and they went back and forth. And what I'm saying is like,
Yeah.
even without deepfake, people are really, really good at this, and it's hard for us to detect.
Mm-hmm.
I want to put that out there. Now, when it comes to that actual, let's say, deepfake videos, let's go down that angle. Like, let's say you're on a screen, and kind of see that. I think the first thing that people can do, that I've been looking into this, and again, it's not easy, but the first thing is watch the eyes. See, like
Mm.
a human's eyes, there's a little bit of glow, a little bit of life. You can
Mm-hmm.
you can see that. With AI, sometimes they'll keep, or I keep shifting my head, but they'll do this,
Mm.
and it's very controlled movements, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas ours are a little bit more natural. So number one is watch the eyes. Number two is focus on the face. You might actually see, like with a human, and it'll get better, but I'm saying like little nuances, a little like
Mm-hmm.
crevices on the face as they're moving and as they're shaking around. There'll be a mismatch when it comes to deep fakes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Number three, as I said, listen carefully. Now this one's hard because back to our Jeff Goldblum or our impersonator example, people can be really, really good, and our ears, if you close our eyes, it's kind of hard. You're like, I don't know, it sounds kind of right, right? Um, number four, check the background. How is the background shimmering? And now when we have virtual backgrounds, might be a little difficult, but like you can tell like usually when it's a human on a digital background
Mm-hmm.
versus if it's going to be like a completely recorded video on a fake background, right? And you know the last one is common sense. You've got to be able to, you have to be able to train yourself with being able to see these types of things, and it becomes more common sense. But if something seems really outrageous, it's probably outrageous,
Mm-hmm.
and then check trusted news sources, right? Especially if you know it's like a media outlet or something like that. Fact check,
Where it's coming
and
from.
yeah, and look for verification from multiple. Don't just like follow one link,
Mm-hmm.
maybe chain of like 2 to 3 links, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, those are the kinds of things I think that you could really do. It's
Mm-hmm.
going to get more difficult, Nana, and people in these entities will become more
Yeah.
nefarious, right? Um,
So I think then you jump into one the other question I want to ask you about,
mm,
which is um, sort of AI evolving very fast. Like you said, chats came around 2022. Now it's an entirely different thing. I think when we met first, I was talking to you about me experimenting with it,
mm,
and how it was then and how it is now has massively changed. And Mid Journey has also, when I got into Mid Journey, was just starting. So I
mm.
was going through and then I stopped. Now I have no idea where it is at the moment, but
Yeah. There's a website now, Nana. Go to midjourney.com and you don't even need Discord. You can create right on the
yes.
browser. It's so good.
So I'm one of the Discord people.
Yeah, yeah. Same. I still have the Discord app on my phone, and I'm like, oh my, I
yes.
don't need this anymore. Just go create on the web browser. So good.
So it's evolving very, very fast.
Mm, mm.
What do you think the world will be 10 years from now with AI embedded in our daily lives?
It's a tough one. I don't even know what 2 to 5 years would look like. But if I were to kind of put on a dreamy hat, 2035, and I look at it, right, I'm like,
Mm,
what I do know for sure is that the next 10 years is going to be a period of where AI is going to transform and also
mm,
integrate into our daily lives,
yeah.
bar none, right? Rather than this overwhelming disruption, it's going to like, oh my gosh, AI is going to take over. Robots are going to be driving around and flying around. No, we're not going to be able to book our plane tickets for trips anymore because like not none of that. And I think the key isn't to worry about AI evolving too fast.
Yeah.
It's to ensure that we evolve our understanding and implementation alongside AI.
Mm-hmm.
That is what we can focus on because if I take a page out of the Stoic philosophy, it's that you have zones of control, and there are things you can control and there are things you cannot control. And so you focus on what you can control, what you have power over. And what you do have power over is your own knowledge, your own understanding, those types of things. You may not have control over how quickly AI evolves and starts to fly. That might be beyond your grasp, and that's okay too, right? Um, it reminds me of surfers riding waves, right?
Mm-hmm.
All you can really do is hop on your surfboard, make sure you got the gear, and when the waves arrives, you kind of go with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think when I've been doing some research around the pragmatic sides of like what this potential future would look like around AI, if you look at our day to day life, I think AI is going to be, or this whole generative AI is going to be as commonplace as our smartphones today,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
right? Bar none, right? So it'll be more invisible and intuitive. So it'll be
Mm-hmm.
integrated that way. Um, if I look at like education, I think education is going to take a big jump because
Yeah.
now you can learn so quick
Mm-hmm.
on your own, right? Like I knew a guy that taught himself in 6 months how to code, like how to code a complex like basic language.
Mm-hmm.
It was fantastic. Like he's like Vaseem. I was able to, and I'm not saying I'm writing code using AI, but I was able to learn the theory, the methodology, the syntax, all of that because I just kept going back and forth, back and forth. As soon as I didn't understand something, I'd be like, okay, can you explain this div
Mm-hmm.
class symbol? What again? Way beyond my pay
Mm-hmm.
grade, right? He's like, can you explain this, and this? And he actually took the time to learn that way. Historically, before you'd have to go and take maybe coding boot camps, or you'd have to
Mm-hmm.
read textbooks, or go to this website called Stack Overflow. This gentleman was just engaging back and forth and feeding his question marks, feeding his gaps, and then
Mm-hmm.
having AI fill those gaps. Right. So I think education is going to be huge. Um, so that's one angle. I think from a business standpoint, I think businesses are going to be transformed.
Yeah.
We talk about automation. A lot of those routine tasks,
Yeah.
I look at like accountants that are doing like variance analyses, or comparing this side versus this side, and doing conditional formatting in Excel or something like that. Like all that stuff can be taken care of. Freeing humans to do more of like the creative and strategic work,
Yeah.
right? I think small businesses, I see in the
Mm-hmm.
next 10 years, there's going to be a huge gold mine of growth with small businesses, because
Mm-hmm.
all of a sudden you have you have access to like knowledge and capabilities that was once only reserved for the large multinational corporations with money.
Yes.
Now,
Yes.
with generative AI,
Yes.
it starts to level out that playing field.
Yes.
So small businesses can now just
Yes.
accelerate, right? And
Yes.
yeah, so I see that. So that's going to be really neat, right? When the underdogs start to really start playing with the Goliaths, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm. And then the last thing I think is going to be important is about, I think the ethics piece is really going to take off in the next 10 years.
Yeah.
I think right now it's wild wild west, which is
Mm-hmm.
okay. I think you need that with creativity and innovation and those kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
I think as we start to see more of these deep face examples, or start to see some of the consequences of nefarious entities doing things with
Yes.
AI, then we start to get the ethics and
Mm-hmm.
the guidelines around it. Because let's face it, Nana,
Yeah.
you don't really need ethics and guidelines for good people. Good people kind of
No.
know. They're just like moving around, like loving. Here, you want a burger? You want some bread? You want some sugar? Come. You want
Yeah.
a big hug? I see you're down. Like I'm not gonna kick you when you're down. Like good people or good forces are okay. Like
Mm-hmm.
they're not messing with AI and doing dumb stuff. They're just like they're okay. They may dabble a little bit, but they're not using it to harm others, because they're good people. They don't want to harm others, right?
Mm-hmm.
As I said, with the nefarious forces, as they start to do more of that, which could accelerate, right?
Yeah.
Then I think more guidelines and ethics and consequences hopefully will come
Will
into
come
play,
in.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm not going to go into spirituality or ethics or philosophy. You mentioned Stoic philosophy. It's like my mind always almost went there. It's like, okay, come back to let's talk about AI. So
Yeah, 100%.
let's get this right.
Mm,
We're talking about AI, but AI is not what you started doing first. You were doing something else. So for people who are interested in adding AI to whatever that they are doing,
mm,
let's come to what you're doing and then
mm.
you'll take and picking up AI.
Yeah, yeah, for
Because
sure.
then it's like not stuck in one place. For instance, even though I
Mm.
do nursing, does not mean I cannot invest or investigate, using AI stuff.
Not at all, no. And I read this on a LinkedIn post. One of my friends that I used to know for a very long time, she
Hmm.
wrote she wrote about this. She says humans are mixtapes, not singles.
I love that.
Right, right. Like, that hit me hard.
I
That hit me
love that.
hard, right? Because I think someone was talking to her about, because she's a photographer and she's
Hmm.
also in sales, like enterprise sales.
Yeah.
And someone was like, "Why don't you only do photography?" Right?
Yes.
And her response was that, right? It was just like, "Well, we're mixed. We have a lot of different things going on." Right? So I was like, I like that, right? And so if I take us back to kind of like my where this all came from, and why do
Hmm.
I do this, right? I think even from a very very young age, I've always wanted to be a teacher,
Mm.
right? From a very young age. I think I even had this vision when I was in high school to apply to teachers college, and
Hmm.
originally wanted to go into journalism to
Hmm.
write about things and so forth. And my father was quite a stern man, and in a way that overprotective and controlling parents can be, he essentially had an ultimatum. He said, go to business school or find a new place to live, right?
Mm.
So
No choice.
no choices in those times, right? So throughout my life, though, I've always gravitated towards helping others, right? And when I reach a certain point in stage in life, I'm the kind of guy who's passing down a ladder this way and passing down a ladder this way. Like, come on, let's go together,
Hmm.
And so I know I talked about ChatGPT coming on 2022, but let's kind of think about where kind of my journey began there. So as I started going around, as Vaseem the AI guy here in Brantford, right? This observation became me as this guy, kind of like an AI Sherpa, because I would meet people where they were at on this journey. I'd be like, okay, I've kind of been up the mountain hundreds of times and I've come back
Hmm.
down. I kind of know the ways up in and around it. Let me show you. And where are you? Are you in the land of fear? Totally cool. Are you in the land of uncertainty? Not a problem. Are you also a climber? Hey, let's talk about this, and like all that kind of stuff, right? And
Hmm.
so I think where my approach of AI became unique was that Instead of focusing on the technical side about how do language models work and all of those intricacies, I developed a talent for making AI concepts really, really simple and accessible through relatable stories, right? And real world examples. So I show people like when I'll take a picture of like my outfit for the night, right? And I'll lay it on my bed and I'll throw it into ChatGPT and I'll say, hey, out of these 5 socks, which ones will go best with these shoes? Can you tell me why? And then I show people this example when I'm wearing the clothing, right? They're like, no way, you got ChatGPT to dress you. I'm like, yes, I got my wife to buy my clothes because she knows fashion sense. But if I'm having like a dilemma about like how do I mix and match certain things
Mm-hmm.
together, this is how I leverage ChatGPT. And people are like, oh my gosh, I never thought of leveraging AI like that, right? And so I try to bring real life examples that are in people's day to day,
Mm-hmm.
right? Another one that I've shown folks is that I wasn't feeling well like the last couple of days. I
Yeah.
was you know I was recovering, and I took a picture of my spice cabinet and I took a
Mm-hmm.
picture of my vegetables, and I said, okay, based on this, and these are the things that I have. Can you help me come up with a program or an elixir to make that will help me with these symptoms? Right. So and it worked, right? So like every couple of hours I would check in with ChatGPT and I would go, okay, wow, thank you for this. These are my new symptoms. These are the things that I'm feeling. These are the things that I've
Mm-hmm.
recovered from. Hey, now I'm not saying that ChatGPT can be a replacement for a medical practitioner. Not at all. I'm saying though it can be an aid. You can get some help for specific things that maybe you're troubled with in your day-to-day life, right? So
Mm-hmm.
as I started to explore this more and more and taught more folks, I start unlocking use cases and then I bring that back to others. That's kind of how this snowball effects has started to occur. And you mentioned Midjourney. I ended up
Mm-hmm.
writing a children's book, so that taught me a lot
Uh,
about how I can create art,
I was actually coming
right?
to that.
Yeah, yeah, right. So that also all of these types of experiences
Yes.
reinforced this thing that
Yes.
you know what I've dabbled with AI, I've done this, and I've done this. Now that I have some semblance of knowledge,
Mm-hmm.
I want to impart that knowledge onto others to get them up to speed to a certain baseline, right? There are always going to be people who are way smarter than me, Nana, and that's okay.
Yes.
You know?
We all climbing somehow,
Yeah,
somewhere. Yes,
yeah,
as you said, you meet people where they are and support them through this journey. So
yeah.
I was going to come back. You mentioned the book.
Mm.
I was going to come to that, but since you mentioned it, let's talk about it. What is it about? And if a person is looking for, a copy or copies, where can they find it?
Yeah, so I'll answer the second one. So it's available on Amazon.ca,
Mm-hmm.
Amazon.com. It's available worldwide, Amazon.uk. So and the book is called ABCs of the Future. Really, really simplistic book that takes concepts from A to Z. So A is for augmented reality, B is for drones, so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
And really, it helps to explain some of these futuristic technologies that are either theoretical or real life in a simple way that a 5-year-old can understand. And I wrote the book actually as an exercise to learn about GPT and see its capabilities and to see how these AI capabilities can come together. And it very quickly evolved into a dialogue starter between parents, caregivers, and kids because the book is now interactive, right? So the layout of the book is really, really simple. On the left page, you've got like an introduction to, let's say, B is for bioprinting and a short little Dr. Seuss type of rhyme on the left hand side. And there's actually a QR code that you can scan that takes you to a separate web page that explains that concept in a lot more detail so that an
Mm-hmm.
adult reading it may be able to understand this technology as well and have that conversation with that child. And then on the right side of the page is a nice little image that I created using Midjourney to illustrate the concept of, let's say, bioprinting. But for each letter, that's the general flow and format of the book.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Um, we're almost coming to the end, guys. If you've been watching, I'm having a beautiful conversation with my brother, Vaseem, the AI guy, who has been taking us through all this AI journey. And at this moment, we really, as human beings, have created this system that we don't have a choice. It's here. It's
Mm,
going to come. No, scratch that. It is here. It's not going anywhere.
mm.
One of the doctors I work with, and she's the only one that I can actually have AI conversations with, and
Ah,
not anybody else.
yeah, yeah.
And she was showing me when she's doing dictation an AI model that she uses, and it was so cool. It
Mm.
felt chat GPT kind of like feel to it, and she was showing me, and it made sense. It really did make sense that it's predictive.
In which way? What do you mean by predictive?
The assessment, the medications to use,
Oh,
etc., etc. Yes.
mm.
So it lays it all down for her, and then she goes in, and if she wants to change stuff, she changes stuff according to what is happening, and she copies and
Oh,
she
that's
pastes it.
mighty. I
Eh,
like
eh,
that.
So she was trying to see if the hospital will be interested in getting that for the rest. And I started laughing. I said, you're the only one that I speak to about AI in this place.
Mm.
Nobody else.
Yeah,
Nobody else. And we'll get there, but it will take us a very, very long time. And she has
possibly. Yeah.
adapted to it because the husband, who is an instructor at one of the colleges, realizes that AI is not going anywhere. The
Mm.
students will use it.
Yes.
So, how do they use it properly, ethically? And so that is what he is navigating with the students, that, okay, it's okay to use this,
Mm.
but this is my expectation. Don't put it in and feed it to me. Go over, think about it, go do the further research and add to it. So making them work and not bypassing systems, because he
Mm.
knows they're going to use it. However much you say, don't do this, don't do this, we're getting into a society whereby it is going to be the majority of our lives.
Agreed.
So yeah, so it's pretty fascinating. So what about if you could bust one myth about AI that drives you crazy, what would it be? Ah, this laugh.
The AI Mythbuster. I love it. Ah,
Yes.
I think the one myth that I'd like to bust
Mm-hmm.
is that people running around thinking that AI will replace every single human job on Earth. Okay.
Yes.
This misconception, I understand where it comes from, right? We mentioned Terminator, we mentioned
Yes.
The Matrix, and some of these films or other, sci-fi kind of epics that get into this. I think why it really gets to me is that it misses the fundamental nature of this thing called generative AI, right? Generative AI was never about replacement. It was about enhancement and
Enhancement.
augmenting our thinking. So like as long as we think, as long as we have the ability to critically do and all that, it's going to extend that. It's never meant to be like, oh no, you human person is completely out of the equation, right? I think
Mm-hmm.
that that's the one myth I think I'd like to bust, and I've seen it firsthand, Nana, with some of my clients, right? Multinational corporations to small businesses, is that AI is most powerful when it's worked on alongside the human. You
Mm-hmm.
know, if you don't have that human context, um, then all of your outputs from your AI models are, like you said, it's like what you said about your the instructor and the student. It's not going to be very valuable. Like they really care about you putting your own individual spice into things,
Mm-hmm.
and that's where you get a lot of the value out of this because you're special, you're beautiful, you're unique.
Mm-hmm.
All of that can be provided as that uniqueness to the AI, and then through that synthesis on that, now you have something newly magical and newly beautiful, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I also encourage people to think of it like this way. You know, imagine you had to go and build a deck, right? And all you had was a manual screwdriver. It will
Mm-hmm.
take you a long time, right? But if
Yeah.
you had an electrically powered drill, now you're in business, right?
Yeah.
Now, if you had a wireless drill with, battery pack, that 3 or 4 battery packs, you're in even better business. So, like, again, you're scaling the technology and you're making
Mm-hmm.
it a lot more powerful to be able to accomplish a specific task, right?
Mm-hmm.
The drill never replaced the carpenter.
Mm-hmm.
The carpenter was always the carpenter.
Yeah.
It simply had new tools to work with. So, similarly, you always still need that human creativity, you need that human emotional intelligence, and you need that strategy in order to really make AI valuable, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's kind of how I
As
see it.
we're speaking of that, I'm thinking about, the developing world, utilization of AI
Mm,
in the developing world.
mm,
Say AI and other technologies such as fintech
mm,
and building of how do we call it, battery powered vehicles and all those things. As much as we have these fears here, I realize that the developing world is very quick to take and absorb, and
Yes.
it doesn't take from their humanity or spirituality or anything.
No.
It just makes them jump the industrial so-called revolution that we went through here. So the adaptation to the fourth industrial revolution, which is this AI thing, is a very quick uptake.
Mm-hmm.
A,
Beautiful thing.
it,
Beautiful
it
thing to see.
It is. It is. So, whilst we have this fear so much embedded in us in North America, it is not that kind of fear in many other parts of the developing world. They rather see how best can we utilize it.
That's
Not
right.
to say that there is still not the deep fakes and other,
Yeah.
unsavory aspects of it, but
No.
on a scale of 0 to 10, I
Mm.
think it's working maybe 9.5%, 9.5 more effectively for them, leveraging their knowledge and etc. etc. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
And
that's my personal, like, when I look at how things are going on in the
mm,
world, that's what I see, which is a beautiful thing,
it
which
is
is
because,
beautiful.
again, like we said, it's like about if we take the small business to multinational corporation, right?
Mm,
Example, leveling the playing field. Now you look at developing world versus developed world,
yeah,
leveling the playing field,
exactly,
right?
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
It's a wonderful thing.
Exactly, exactly. So
Yeah.
if you could leave listeners with one message, about the future of AI and our role in it, what would that be? Oh boy.
I would say, yeah, no, these are good, and I want to make sure there's some value to what I say.
Hmm.
I would say embrace it with an open mind, stay curious,
Hmm.
you know, and really start to think of generative AI as your bestie that has read all the books in the library and wants to talk to you about these books that it has read.
Whew. So we've talked about Mid Journey, we've talked about ChatGPT, that which is very, very big. These two are big, so you could explore those. And if you don't know, just Google generative AI on Google, and
Yeah.
Google will give you, links and suggestions and whatnot to it. And the intention is to make our lives less, difficult and smoother in what we do. Vasim, this has been a very beautiful conversation. My stretching ride, and I feel like you broke it down into tiny bits and pieces we could swallow, and places where we could go. So, guys, if you found this episode to your liking, please share. It's about learning. And this is part of the story of humanity. We evolve, and if you get left behind, trust me, you have a long way to catch up. But if you can start right now from somewhere, by the time people start coming in, you already have a foot or a leg, ahead. Because we start from one before we get to 10. If you don't start, then you are not going to get anywhere. Um,
You said it well,
Vasim,
Nana. You said it well. One of my mentors used to say, "Start where you are, do what you can with what you have." That's it.
that's it. So where can we find you, your social media handles, etc., etc., so
Yeah, there's
people
a
can
couple of
find you?
places. Yeah, so Instagram is probably Vaseem the AI guy.
Mhm.
You can find me there. I'm quite active on LinkedIn, and you can always visit my website www.vaseemtheaiguy.com.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you for saying yes. Thank you for coming on this podcast. It's been truly amazing. And I hope we have this conversation again as time goes on, because I know things are going to evolve. And as things are evolving, we are also evolving with those things. Thank you so much, Vasim. It's been such a pleasure. Thank you, listeners. Thank you, viewers. See you next time.
Thank you, Nana. Bye bye.
Splice Originals.